mom was illiterate, right? She never went to school a day in her life. And so I remember when I started school, right, the teachers would say, if you have trouble with your homework, you should go ask your parents for help. So me not knowing any better, I would come home with math homework and I'd ask my mom for help. My mom was never taught how to do math, right? But what my mom has, what every Mexican mom has, is beans, right? So my mom would be cleaning a pile of beans on the table and she would teach me how to do math, addition and subtraction with a pile of beans on the table, right? So that's how I learned to do basic math. So, and then I remember when, it was time for parent-teacher conference and my mom would come in and the teacher would just rain praise on my mom that you must be doing something right. Jesus is such a good student and this and that. So I would see that the smile that would put on my mom's face, that she would be recognized for something I did. And I think I carried that on my whole education, is to put that smile on my parents' face, that started at a really young age. So I think that carried me a really long way in my education, in terms of always want to make my parents proud. I grew up in San Fernando, which is about 20 miles northeast of Los Angeles. Predominantly Latino neighborhood, predominantly immigrant neighborhood. So growing up here, it very much felt like it was in my element, right? Because everybody was like me. All the kids I played with in the street. I think we had one African-American family in the neighborhood when we were growing up, right across the street. Pretty much everybody else was Latino. Having one parent at home and having my dad go out and work. It was a beautiful thing. We grew up with chickens and goats and rabbits in the backyard. My dad was always big about living amongst the trees, right? So we had aguacate in the backyard, naranjos, you name it, we had every kind of fruit growing in the backyard. That was my dad's I like living like Tarzan, entre los árboles. So it felt very much that connection. When I went to Mexico and I saw what it was like and we come back here, I was like, yeah, I can see how they brought some of that, and made it home here. And a lot of people shared the same struggle that we did, right? Most of their family was first generation, and a lot of them, their parents were here, they were undocumented. So it's not like I felt like an outsider. Everybody was pretty much like me. So we heard these stories, growing up of our families and how they got here. And my dad came to this country as a migrant farm worker and a bracero, but there was on occasions where he had to come across the border illegally. Sometimes when we're driving down the street, he sees an old, 50s Chevy pickup truck, and he's like, "Mira, mijo, en una de esas me vine." My dad didn't come across the border driving one of these trucks. He didn't come as a passenger. He didn't even come in the back hidden under something, right? The way my dad came across the country was hidden inside the engine bay of the truck, right? As the guy drove it across the border. And my dad tells a story, of course, of being in there, right? The guy told him, whatever you do not say anything. I don't care if you're burning, if your leg is gonna fall off, you do not say anything. So he remembers getting up to the border, right? And then get up to the place where the border patrol is, and the guy was doing his rounds around the truck, and my dad could see through the wheel well. And he saw the guy's boots, right? And my dad was just scared. He's like, "Please don't sneeze, don't do anything, don't do nothing stupid." So, sure enough, he got the pass and he was able to go. It became relevant to me as I got older, and you appreciate the sacrifices your parents made. And really the people come to this country for one reason and one reason only, right? It's to give themselves, and more importantly, their family, a better life. And sometimes the sacrifices or the things they do in order to do that are pretty amazing. I was always kind of naturally gifted in mathematics. I was blessed to have really good math teachers, and I think one of the first ones that really made a big difference in my life was my middle school math teacher at San Fernando Middle School, or junior high back then, Mrs. Ledford. She was such a good teacher, and she instilled that passion in me, right, about math and all these things. And I remember one time, she asked me, what do you think you're gonna do when you get older, right? And I said, I want to be a mechanic, right? I like wrenching on cars and doing things like that. I used to take apart lawnmowers. And she's like, "No, you're way too smart to be a mechanic. You should be designing cars, not fixing them." you know? And so she planted that seed. She goes, and not only that, she goes, you're smart enough where if you do want to be an engineer is what you should be, you have to start looking at these schools, right? She was a Stanford grad herself. She goes, look at Stanford, look at Cal, look at Caltech, look at MIT. She goes, so she started naming all these big name schools, right? So she kind of planted that seed back then. Is like, you know, you should be an engineer, and these are the schools you should be thinking about when you decide to do that. But I never forgot when Ms. Leffer said is you need to shoot for these schools, right? So that was kind of my goal in high school, was I need to get into one of these top engineering schools, right? I remember when it was time to start getting envelopes back, the responses from the schools, and I was in class, and my friend Vladdy, he had gotten into MIT, right? We had applied together. So he had gotten his acceptance letter already, and I hadn't gotten mine. So I went into the office and I asked the secretary, Sylvia, hey, can I make a phone call to the house to see if I got a letter? She's like, yeah, go ahead. So I called the house and asked my mom, did I get a letter? She's like, yes. I asked her, is it a big letter or is it a small letter, right? Because that's always the key question. She goes, no, it seems to be pretty big. So I was like, okay, good. So I hung up and I said, Sylvia, can I run to the house? Because I live a block and a half away from the high school. She goes, yeah, go ahead. So I come running to the house. Sure enough, I open up that letter and it's my acceptance letter. And of course I just started crying and screaming my head off and this and that. And then I look over to my mom and I see the look of happiness on her face. And then just immediately it just switches to like this other thing. It's like her sadness in her eyes. And I think I realized, and my mom started realizing what was gonna happen for me is I was gonna move away. And so I'm over here like trying to, in one of the happiest moments of my life, but yet for my mom it might be one of the saddest, right? Because her son's finally gonna move away. My parents just couldn't understand, is like, why do I want to go away for school? There's CSUN, there's these other schools. And they didn't comprehend what the significance of a place like MIT was. So my dad works at it's a museum, right? And they restore classic antique cars, antique furniture, and he works with some engineers. So I remember after I graduated high school, some of his coworkers knew that I had graduated high school, so they asked him, so what's your son gonna do? And he's like, well, he got into this school, MIT on the East Coast and this and that, and the guy's jaw just hit the floor, man, practically, he couldn't believe that the son of the janitor was going to a place like MIT. So I think my dad realized at that point what had happened for me, and he came home that day, and my dad was very, I guess, he wouldn't show much emotion back then, right? But that day my dad got home, he gave me a big hug, and he just told me, mijo, no sabes lo que es sentir el orgullo de tener un hijo, el hijo de un humilde barrendero que llegue a esas cosas, a hacer estas cosas, a ir a esta escuela. So I think my dad realized at that moment what had happened for me, and it was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. As hard as it was for him and my mom to let me go, he knew it was for the best. This is what they've always wanted, right? It's for me to take advantage of an education, and what better way than to go to a place like MIT to do that. So MIT is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is right across the Charles River from Boston. So Boston and LA couldn't be two very different cities. First, it's a lot older city. It's more condensed. The architecture is so different. The weather is very different, right? The East Coast winters are no joke. So it was a big transition going from growing up in a predominantly Latino community. My high school was like 98% Latino. And then you go into a place where you have people from all over the world studying, So it was a big culture shock. I was a mechanical engineer, major at MIT. When I started going to school, what you realize is the caliber of student that goes there, first of all, is beyond anything you could ever imagine. Some of these kids are super brilliant. Not only that, but then the professors that you get to study under, also very amazing people, right? I mean, we're talking several Nobel laureates. I took a class from the ex-director of the CIA. It's just an amazing place, especially as an engineering student, It's like this whole campus is just geared for people that study sciences and engineering. So it's a very unique place in that sense. When I got there, I was convinced that MIT made a mistake by letting me in. It was like, I don't belong here. I'm not smart enough for this place, but the one thing I wasn't was too proud to ask for help. Quite the opposite. I was scared, but you know what? I'm just gonna try my hardest and I'm gonna do whatever I have to make it out of this place. I think that served me really well in terms of being able to get the help that I needed in a timely fashion and not worry about if people were gonna call me stupid or whatever. But I took that opportunity, I made the most of it. And I ended up graduating with a better GPA than probably a lot of those kids, right? That went to these big name private schools. Luckily, like I said, I had some really good people, that got me through that place. So of course I looked for people that reminded me of my friends back home. I found kids that are just like me. Some kids that went to Garfield, went to Roosevelt, and these are kids whose parents were first generation as well. And so you talk about, people that make arroz and frijoles, you'd get together and have these dinners, carne asadas. So you like always, my parents brought a little piece of Mexico here to the San Fernando Valley. People bring a little bit of East LA and San Fernando over to the MIT campus, so it reminds you of home. And that, I think, made the experience there really rewarding. After countless sleepless nights and all kinds of studying and problem sets and tests, finally came the time to graduate from MIT. And I remember when we got there, my dad with this Dodger hat, in the middle of Boston. My mom, we have these commencement books, with everybody's names. My mom was going around hoarding them, right? People would leave them on their chairs and she'd pick them up and she brought them home as recuerdos, right? She's like, Mom, it's not like a quinceañera, you don't bring these, but that's what moms are gonna do, it was an amazing feeling to finally be done with something like that. I know it was probably one of the hardest things I've done in my life and probably will be one of the hardest things I ever do in my life. So that sense of accomplishment it's an unbelievable feeling. It's like growing up as a kid, after hearing Ms. Ledford talk about these schools, here I was, making it out from it was a big, big deal for me, and not only that, but the fact that I was coming home, I did what I had to do. I did my 4 years and I was coming home. So I worked for a year and then I went back to Stanford and I pursued a master's degree in mechanical engineering as well, with a design and analysis emphasis. So I work for Raytheon Space and Airborne Systems. It's a defense electronics company. So a lot of the things we do get used by the warfighter or our soldiers or our enlisted men and women in the armed services. Some of the interesting things I get to work on are, I was the lead engineer for the thermal design of the F-15 radar system. And the radar system is probably one of the most important pieces of technology on the airplane because it is the eyes of the airplane. And the way you survive a dogfight, when you're up there flying against the enemy, is you need to see them before they can see you. And that's the job of the radar system. So we're sure to give our men and women that are out there fighting for our freedom the capability to come back home to their families, right? By putting the best tools in their hands to do their job. One of the things I love about what I do is you get to work on some of the latest and greatest technology. We're always pushing the envelope as to what we can do. So as an engineer, this is what it boils down to, right? Is you solve problems. That very rigorous and methodical problem-solving mentality can be applied to things that are governed by the laws of man, right? We talk about politics, you can talk about law and business. The possibilities are just endless. Anything you can think about, you can see, an engineer's probably had his hands in it, right? In one way or another. So I think, that's one of the beautiful things, or one of the really neat things about pursuing a STEM or an engineering degree, is the fact that you're not going to be pigeonholed into one thing. You can always go off and find your place in the world doing something else. And I think it's those critical problem-solving skills that are going to serve you really well in life. I think my good friend Nora once said, is you can't expect kids to be something they can't see or they don't see. So how do I expect kids to go off and want to be an engineer if they don't ever see one, they don't ever interact with one, you know? And for me, not only that, it's important that kids see people that look like them, that talk like them, that come from the same backgrounds as them, doing these things. So one of the things I did after I went off to MIT is I would come back for summer break, winter break, and I would go to my high school and I'd go talk to the classes, right? I'd tell them about my experience. I tell them about the rewards of going to places like MIT and the Boston and how nice it is, and just to make sure that these kids saw that going to these schools was something that was within the possibility for them, right? There was a possibility for them to do this. And then you start getting involved in other things. There's the Adelante conference. We put on a conference every year where we bring in, at this point, it's over 2,000 students from all across Southern California, and we do a day of workshops with all kinds of professionals from different industries that come in and give workshops to these middle and high school students. And I participate in some of the workshops. I go and do a rocket workshop with them, so we make bottle rockets. All right, so you're gonna make a rocket. Really, it's 3 different components to your rocket. You have your rocket body, you got your fins for stabilization, and you got your nose cone. Right? We're going to launch them using a compressor-powered air launcher. Is that your car? Oh! So it's really good to be involved, not only as a board member, but then involved with the students on a level, right? So there's multiple reasons why I've decided to stay here, but definitely still being a presence, in this community, I think is very valuable. The only way we're going to make our communities better is if we do go off, make something of ourselves, and then come back. Because what good does it do for us to, do all this and then just leave, right? Is you have to come back, because that's how you make things better. So a couple of the key takeaways I have in terms of keys to success, right? And I would say number 1 being, don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it, right? I saw that was a big downfall of a lot of students at MIT, is they needed help, but didn't have the nerve to ask for it because for some reason they thought people were gonna think they were stupid or what's wrong with you. Always never be afraid to ask for help. You're not gonna always have the answers, right? So don't be afraid to go ask somebody who does have the answers to help you out. Second thing, and of course this is always what somebody's gonna tell you, is hard work, right? You have to put in the work, and it's a very true thing, is you can be naturally gifted, which is some people are. Some of the kids I went to school with were, but I think I worked twice as hard as they did, and I was able to be successful, and maybe they were too, but nothing to that. But that's the thing, is if you don't have those natural abilities, don't think you're not able to do something. It just means you're gonna have to work harder at it. And those payoffs are gonna come down the line. Don't expect that everything's gonna happen for you right away. And then the last thing I'll say is never ever forget where you came from and the people that helped get you there. To understand your history, your family's history, the struggles of that, that are involved in that history can be a very powerful motivating force in your life. It's your obligation, to pay, I would say pay it forward or whatever you want to say, but a lot of people helped you out, and you're gonna have to do the same thing for somebody else at one point. It's not, I got mine, so now I'm out, you get yours. It's this giving back and keeping that cycle going, right? It's somebody helped you out, you help somebody else out, and the chain keeps going. The more people you bring up, the better we're gonna be as a society.